just looking at our substitute utilization, we had this year, once we started in-person learning, we actually created some sort of regular sub-slots for staffing to help, for example, screening kids at entry, working on the playground to help keep kids safe. And it looks like those may continue. We hate to hire full-time folks into those because we don't know. So we actually increased the budget for both teaching and classified substitutes in this version. So, and this is all contingent on enrollment returning to our pre-2021 levels. So we'll see how that goes. If that doesn't happen, we gave a conservative estimate, but if we see fall enrollment not looking good, then we would be rolling back that estimate of enrollment, which would tighten up that or lessen that state school fund amount, which means some of these one-time expenses then would not take place. So we'll be cautiously optimistic through October. So. And those are the assumptions that were confirmed or changed to produce the version before you, which is shows up as you look through the pages. It shows up under the approved column, which is the middle column. It's not approved yet, but that would be if you accepted this as the budget.
That's the 63,596,140 that's on this summary sheet.
Right. So if you look at what is right behind the introduction in your budget packet, as Don points out, there is a section called Summary of All Funds. And that does result in a $63,596,140 overall projected budget for the 20.
Thank you, Cease. I'm flipping through too many pages here. Can you tell me what last year's was?
It's funny. It was not significantly different last year, partly because the general fund is actually less this year. It's actually less revenue overall because of the state school fund reduction that we're looking at. So because of the look back. So the general fund is actually a little less. But overall, I know where it is. Introduction to the budget, it does mention that.
Somewhere.
Yeah. General fund. Just about these things. So on page 2 of the introduction, under budget format and organization, it mentions that the current year budget of $63,596,140 as compares to last year was $60,054,618. So overall, it's up a little, partly because of the federal money, but also partly because of the carryovers. Not just in our general fund, but we have a lot of unspent money in some of our other funds, such as our after-school fund, our high school success fund. So we are able to carry those through September of this year, and those carry-ins created more significant budgets. Plus, high school success and the Student Investment Act are fully funded this year as opposed to prior year, but they were not considered fully funded. Overall, it's up. General fund is down a little bit. The special revenue funds make 6% increase.
Appreciated the analysis you did on the taxation question. That was very thorough and very well done. So I appreciated you looking at that.
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting question. So thanks for the good question. So I can look at that and learn it.
It turned out to not be a good idea, but it was nice to have looked through that and talk through that scenario. So
yeah, I think to be able to tell people that you know, a modest decrease in their taxes is certainly something that is good to consider, but especially with the property tax permanent rate, it just has such a small impact on individuals. And when you think about our second largest taxpayer being Northwest Natural Gas, which no one thinks of as owning property in our communities, but they are the top 10 taxpayer in almost every jurisdiction. They pay a lot of property taxes for the rights to run their natural gas lines. So that is a significant, more significant impact on those kinds of taxpayers than on our families.
interesting.
Yeah. And then sort of the other point we heard you all say, folks have had a rough year, and our families have felt, you know, perhaps that a gesture of will to the extra work they've done and extra stress that's happened to them and their families. But the tax rate reduction would never thank our families who don't have kids or who don't own property, right? So I doubt that the River Place Apartments would take their $4,000 that they got in relief and offer that as rent relief. So it probably wouldn't have the impact I think I heard you all ask.
That's my conclusion too. But it was a very nice analysis, so appreciated that.
Yeah, I'm glad that helped. It was, as I say, it's good learning for me about the impact would be.
Are there any other questions about the budget?
Yes, I have one. So it's 6% increase over year. How much of that is sustaining everything as compared to one time?
Yeah, most of it's one time. Except for those I mentioned, high school success budget, student investment account, those should continue at this new level. Those were, you know, sort of reduced amounts that were given based on the state's uncertainty. But the federal is one-time money, and we do have that sort of around 3.5 to 4 million more than we would normally plan to carry in the general fund that we would be spending sort of in one-time ways or in our contingencies. So
the staffing plan that's in the proposed budget is aligned to the sustaining portion of the revenue or
yes,
budget?
Except in the ESSER funds, we do have a significant staffing plan specifically to start developing the systems we need to really make an effective online school. So building that up on the front end, using the federal dollars, we hope that we would then be able to bring that in using our sustaining dollars at the end of 2020. That's going to be a push forward in our mind.
Right.
And that we have been since the beginning of this process. And then obviously in recovery, that has been a big part of our conversation of where do we put money that is one time versus trying to build that into the sustainability of the general fund of the high school success and the student investment account. So we have worked really hard in this budget to try and do that. That is why you'll continue to hear myself and many others keep advocating for the 9.496 because that impacts is going to, again, a couple years down as we negotiate and do different things that all that impact is pushed forward.
We've talked in budget committees and also in the board meeting about the online academy, but I don't know that I've heard an actual budgetary number or a staffing level. And then, I mean, that's
So the budget portion of that, so again, in your packet, this particular version itemizes out both the student investment account and the ESSER fund. It's behind the section called special revenue funds. It's not harder about the little tabs, but there's a section called special revenue funds, and these didn't get numbered once they were put together. Special revenue fund just a little over halfway back after the end of the general fund pages. Includes summary pages and then it has the service pages. And it shows that ESSER COVID relief funding. And it's $2.5 million is what we are planning to spend for this 1 year. We have that same amount roughly to carry forward each of the successive 3 years. That section called distance learning. So we have a function distance learning. And that portion is 1.329 million of the ESSER COVID. The salaries and associated payroll costs are a pretty small part of that 1.3. The largest portion of that is to continue acquiring Chromebooks, using finding other software assessments and things that we want to do, as well as paying for the Stride K-12.
Summary sheet that comes right from the general fund title page. It shows that our budget for 21-22, I'm just going all the way to the bottom line, is 405. And if I look at our last 3 years of actuals, they're 370, 365, 351. So that's an increase of 50 some odd people on a budget that's only growing 6%.
Right, and part of that is, well, as you see, we always budget, where we end up are pretty different just by positions we don't fill. And the budget or the actuals are a short time. It doesn't include every position we fill during the year if that person left before the end of the year, for example. So we often end up with higher or much lower actual numbers than we had budgeted. In this case, if you kind of compare across, the COVID relief grant, these folks for the online school, that's almost 11 FTE right there. And the student investment account, for the past couple of years, as we ramped up to it, we put 4.5 staff in there. We are adding assistant principals at the elementary level. We're adding some technology or librarian support. So you'll notice a significant increase there as well. High school success. We've been less than funded by the legislature. projecting full funding, and so we're almost doubling the people who will be assigned towards the goals of the high school success program. But even, you know, say, if you look at what was budgeted last year versus our budget this year, you know, we're down 1.25%. But the actual and budget is literally a moment in time as far as folks who are positions that we actually.
And again, both in the high school success and the student investment account with what was done at the high school with the community, and then obviously with what we've done with our building the strategic plan, but what was also the Student Success Act. Again, we are building systems where we actually have the correct people in place to help us get students, again, keeping them on that trajectory, or those that are behind, being able to catch them up. And then, you know, things like behavioral health, because we know some of the things, while we have done a good job of working through COVID. Again, you're going to hear a little bit more tonight from the health center and our youth and family behavioral health of what they've seen as we've gone through this. I think there's things that we talk about that we don't know what we don't know, but we are putting things into place, again, prior to, but then also being very cognizant of the learning that we need to continue to move forward with students, and some of the approaches with the ESSER, one-time money that we have received. So to be very honest, we're getting very close to a fully funded public education.
Right now. I guess my concern is the same that I think Steve is sharing, is I think it could be really tempting to start to feel comfortable right now, and I'm not sure that's the time.
I don't know that I would say comfortable.
Well, I mean, I look at it tonight's thing, and we've got 20-some new hires coming, which is great. But I guess my concern is just to make sure that the 1 people that we're hiring for ESSER know that their job runs out in 2 years or 3 years or whatever that runs out.
Yeah, we're specifically, those will be posted as limited duration grant funded. Common in state jobs, school district jobs, a lot of them are not unusual.
So basically what you're saying.
That's another reason why we're be very cautious, because that the general fund positions may have to.
And that's a big reason we are moving forward with the online school. I am very concerned that if we don't, we will continue to lose enrollment. So that's a big, again, a big part of that continued conversation, because again, I'll share a little bit more tonight, but I have shared with you that we have about 18%. If you take the total 18% of our population of our enrollment, that's about 500 students. We lose 500 students. That's a lot of, that's a lot of ADM. And so again, do I think that 500 will completely go to the online school? No. Do I think between 100 and 300? Yes. And that is a sustainable model that we believe we can be able to offer our students. And that keeps their enrollment with Central School District.
And at that level, easier to move that staff back in general fund. Once we get those things set up.
staffing changes at the district office? Because I'm thinking, we are hiring, we've got work here that we're taking off from online education to student investment account. What, and I know that you
Last budget meeting, I included new positions, and I'm not going to attach that to the packet. You can tell they opened in the staffing, so we looked in last year's sort of grant by grant, but I have a list of the actual positions, so let me grab them.
I'm only seeing like 2.5 increase in the office of the superintendent.
Yeah,
two,
it's.
3 people.
Yeah, there's some, again, with 2 to 3, and I'm gonna say administrative, but then you're looking at some support staff, so there's additional, there's a couple administrative assistants, and again, there is a, potentially additional technology supports. So again, but again, some of that is general fund and some of that is other ESSER funds too.
And the general fund positions were, and some of these are offsetting existing positions that are being changed. For example, our director of student growth and achievement. Two district office administrator jobs that have gone unfilled for. So hiring one person back into that position. And then some program assistants that we are hoping to hire into, a special focus. And those are positions that could be ESSER funded. Their intense focus this year will be on kids who haven't finished learning. But we want to create the systems that will help kids in the future. So those are the general. We hired a extra assistant principal at the high school. That is one of the positions that we published this year, and that was part of our budget. We feel there's enough to turn that position into an assistant principal really with that one. See if we can transition to some of that this year. So that was an ad. And some of the others were just either taking, we have administrative assistants that are only on a 220 schedule, they have work in the month of July. People they support me. It's gonna be really tough. So some of these added FTE or changes in that portion of FTE. So full time. We are adding a full-time tech support back for the beginning. Somebody to work just with the heart. We'll always have one-to-one Chromebooks from now on, so somebody whose job only is managing those passwords and with those, because there were a couple of and then we have some increases in student experience and disabilities as one of our elementary, so there's some addition there. But just a handful down here, but there are some at the district.
Focus yes.
That ad will be at Ash Creek. That addition. So the other two, the Ash Creek Elving has actually one FTE of that, so we're increasing that to 2. Right now, there are 2 or more at each of the other elementary schools.
Those off the needs.
So explain that a little bit more. So this is IES needs focused attention. That's what I was thinking.
So again, and I think when you look at that, when you look at the schools in general, the funding that we're paying for staffing, a lot of that's coming out of the student investment account. So again, there are some funding that is being done through the general fund, but again, part of what we had built with our student investment account is some key positions that if we were fully funded, and some of those are moving into that direction. Again, that falls into our strategic plan, things like extra electives, additional, the vice principals, deans, continued coaching with AVID. Those are the types of other additions that we are doing at that the school sites that are specific to the student investment account. Again, that ties directly into our strategic plan and what we're trying to accomplish both in that college career, in that supports for students, increasing electives at the middle and high school. So again, we're getting to go back to a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, of what we were really planning on implementing and starting to be able to move in that direction finally.
And the IES, because its comprehensive status, has other funding that is not broken out here because it's just not as big.
Right.
When you get $100,000 now, you just kind of lump it all together with other hundreds. So there's that additional funding doesn't show in these specifically.
No more questions. All good response.
It's a lot of, and again, to be very honest, it's been a lot of, not only with what we've been dealing with this year, but this is, when you have finally fully funded in a couple of high school success and the student investment, and then again, the ESSER, which is, I want to be very clear, that's one-time money, and we understand that, and we're trying to budget appropriately and conservatively to be able to do that, knowing that, again, Don, we've talked about this of potentially that having to be backed out and what that would look like and what we're going to do, moving forward. And we're very, very conscious of that as we move forward.
The final guidance for the next pot of ESSER money hasn't come out yet, or it just came out. So we're just getting that final guidance as to how that spending, if that needs to shift over the next 3 years. But we know the one thing that's true is that a significant portion of it will have to go towards learning loss, especially for the students who were most at risk this past year. So these positions that we're adding are really supporting what we know that future need, that future focus of funds will be.
This budget starts in July, is that right?
July 1.
Right, so it includes the summer school.
Right, yeah, if you look
Yes.
at the ESSER COVID relief, there's a nicely chunk of that is specific to summer school, but we got other money for summer school from the state. So the summer school program that we've announced will actually come out of the one-time state funding for this summer. And this summer, we will be using high school success money for high school summer school because they didn't use it all during the school year. So we were allowed to carry that over. The student investment account, we were allowed to carry over. So those mental health supports and things that we use that money for, we are able to contract for extra help this summer in those areas. So there's a lot of that beginning fund balance that's sort of boosted in all those funds that will help support summer school as well. Because all those carry-ins need to be spent by September 30th.
I just signed up for another 4 years, so I don't want to have any bad ones coming up.
We'll just keep advocating at the,
But Now,
John, do you have a question?
glasses on.
Yeah, just there's been a discussion about provisions for continuing online schooling, and kind of the way the system is set up effectively penalizes us if the students opt to go to the Oregon Connections Academy. Has there been any traction with the legislature or the powers that be on changing that dynamic this legislative session, or are we going to basically have to proceed as, you know, each district setting up their own, you know, mini online system?
There is no legislation that's come forth at all. It is a very hot topic right now in the state because, again, a lot of school districts are moving towards that. And I want to be very clear, what we have learned with the, again, and I'm going to take a step back. Traditional online education has been asynchronous. When I say asynchronous, that means majority of online has been driven by the student. With what we have learned in the last year, and then working very closely with K-12 Stride, and again, their partnership and them maneuvering their platforms, we are really working towards what I'm saying is a 50%. Students will be in front of a teacher or support staff for synchronous time at least 50% of the time, plus some one-on-one opportunities, and then some asynchronous time that they would do. Plus, again, I'm going to share this in the board, but you know, we are looking also at even doing some tutoring options, so they still do get some, if they do need it, some interactive, you know, face-to-face in person. They're going to have it online with that synchronous learning. So I can see something potentially in the near future. I think there are a lot of big questions that are being thrown around right now, but we can't wait. That's a disservice to our students that are wanting this. I mean, I have parents that reach out to me and say, please keep this as an option. My son or daughter has done extremely well and has struggled in person in your school. So we have to take that, again, 18%, like I said, that if you're looking at our total population is 500 students. Now, do I believe we'll have 500? Probably not. But if I have, again, even 75 to 300, we can build a sustainable approach and then continue to learn and build upon that. And again, especially with some potential hires that we might be having coming in here in the future. So we're not hearing anything from the legislature. We're hearing it may more come through the state board over the next month, which does not give us a lot of time. So that's partly why I'm moving forward. Sometimes you can wait for guidance, but this one we can't.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on the budget, or are we ready to call for a motion to approve it?
I've got a quick question on that and some feedback, I think. Have you talked to, or has there been discussion with the local ESD where it's shared resources with other school districts that are facing the same kind of questions and challenges as far as the online program?
We have not had that general conversation with the ESD. Again, because of the size of our school district, we feel that we have the capacity to be able to fully function that without having any difficulty. Even again, looking towards the future of that and what that would look like. So I want to be very clear. This is going to be something that a majority of school districts will probably offer in the future, and what that looks like. I think if you are the conversations that we're having across the state of the smaller school districts that are, 400, 200 size school districts, that's the conversation where there may be some collaborative pieces. I will say I'm always open to conversation. So if we get into this, and then again, this is always about learning and then working with your partners, that if we get into this and, we don't like it and we do want to partner with Dallas or do something along those lines, we're always going to be, that is how I am. I love the partnerships, but I do think we potentially have enough to sustain it on our own, but knowing that that's always an option for us to continue to build and partner on.
Yep, I think that'll be the next great shakeout, right? 4 or 5 years from now, because in my colleagues, most districts are not partnering together to do that. They, if possible, want their kids connected to their schools because it makes it easier if they're already enrolled for you to provide services to them rather than if they're enrolled somewhere else. But also just keep hoping, kids will come back and this is the way to keep them attached and connected.
Mhm.
So it is an interesting thought that there'll be a lot going into developing that capacity in so many districts that eventually then the consolidation could happen after that, but it'd be the interesting thing. I mean, ODE is saying one of the guiding principles will be what have we innovated and learned this year and how do we keep that? Don't spring all the way back, right? What's good about what we've done and how do we keep moving forward with that? So I think that's real interesting.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I think that covers all the questions that we had. I do want to give a shout out to Cease for putting all this together and walking us through it every time we meet, because there's a lot of moving parts and I feel comfortable. I know how everything flows and how everything works, and it's a strange year to budget. So good job. So
Say that again.
with that, I would ask for someone to make a motion to approve the budget.
I move that the Central School District 13J Budget Committee approve the budget for the 2021-22 fiscal year in the amount of $63,596,140. Period.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
What was the number? Rachel.
Yes.
So,
Thank you.
8-1 now?
Yeah,
I think that's
see
correct.
Yeah, I
those
think it's 8-1.
lines.
I believe that's 8-1, correct, Aurelia? Is that 8-1?
So is that passed then?
Yes.
Okay. And then I'd also like to ask for another motion for the taxation for the 21-22 year.
I move that the Central School District 13J Budget Committee approve taxes for the 2021-2022 fiscal year upon the assessed value of all taxable property within the district for tax year 2021 to 22. One, at the permanent tax rate of $4.8834 per $1,000 of assessed value for operating purposes. And two, in the amount of $4,483,966 to support the debt service fund for the payment of principal and interest on general obligation bond series 2013 refunding and 2015 refunding.
Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you.
I know. That's okay.
All right, so let's vote on that. So all those in favor of that second motion, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
So was that 8-1 again? Perfect. Excellent. So the budget and the taxes have been approved by the Budget Committee. And with that, I believe we can adjourn. So
Good job.
Good job.
thank you. Do I need to sign?